Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, in today's episode, I want to talk about a post that I saw on LinkedIn from Daniel Pink. He's a fantastic author. I've read a few of his books, and he made a post about something that he saw, a study from Washington University that talks about the importance of spousal relationships when it comes to your own successes at work. And I thought this is an interesting one. This has the potential of going the way where people read it and get up in arms and kind of triggered by it, and it has the potential of it being very helpful. Let's see how Daniel writes this out, right? So I read through it, and it's enlightening because it's impossible to read through this and not think about how that lens applies to your own situation as you're reading it. Oh, is this what I experience, or is this not what I experience? And the study that he mentions in this LinkedIn post talks about how job satisfaction, income, and the likelihood to get promoted are all raised in situations where a person's spouse has a specific, few traits. And I think it's important when you read this that it can be written from the perspective of any person talking about their spouse or partner. And if you are in a situation where you are in a relationship and you're trying to decide whether or not the person you're with is the right person for you long term, if your career is important to you, then these things might be important to look for to make sure that your potential future spouse or partner has. And the traits that Daniel talks about, or how he puts it, the secret sauce is having a spouse or a partner who is both disciplined and dependable. And it absolutely cuts both ways. And in spousal relationships where you're dual income, it absolutely cuts both ways. Right? Because this is something that is both people need to kind of assess this about each other if you are in a situation where both people in the relationship want to work.
Yeah, I think it's as you kind of called out, like whether it's in a current relationship or maybe even a future relationship, these are things to consider and to think about. And it plays out both ways. It's also like, it's not just a one person has the job career / the other person doesn't. The same types of things have an impact on even if both people have a career and are looking for potential opportunities of promotion. There's going to be decisions that may have to be made at some point, but having discipline and being dependable for one another is the critical aspect here. And I love that the study tracked like job satisfaction, income, and likelihood of promotion. So it kind of looked at a large range of how having someone that's a partner who is disciplined and dependable can impact these types of things, and showcasing that these things have a positive impact when you have someone who is disciplined and dependable. And
Right.
And I think to your point too, as you're reading the article, of course, you immediately start to think about like either current relationships or times in your life where maybe things were different. And you start to do kind of the math in your head around looking at, were you able to get more accomplished at work as a result of maybe a relationship that had dependability and discipline in it, and then maybe you may have been stuck, or maybe have not seen the career growth or trajectory as a result of maybe a relationship where you did not have those types of things. And so I think that there is a great amount of conversation here, a great amount of dialogue here. And if you're thinking about building career, it is absolutely critical that you have a spouse or partner that you're having these conversations with, so that you're able to have dialogue around what would this look like, what are the things that would stop us from potentially looking at an opportunity or a promotion, what are the things that allow us to have a kind of a safe haven at home, and things that work for both people. Like that dialogue is critical if you're looking to have a relationship that really supports either one of you in having these opportunities, from a work standpoint. Because when you don't have that level of safe haven at home, what that feels like. I think most people
Right.
can say like, yeah, like it doesn't, like you're more tired to walk in the door at home than you were at work all day. And those things make it really difficult to be your best at work. So I think that it's like it is really important that if you're career minded and you're thinking about future growth and future potential, that at minimum you have somebody in your life that you can talk to about these things, that they can be a part of the dialogue and conversation, and that you can make the best decisions not just for you or for them, but for the you as a couple and or you as a family. And I think that's the type of dialogue that can be tough at the beginning, but once you start to build that consistency and trust in the conversations, it makes it much easier as you go into the future.
Right, right. So, first of all, I want to make something clear here. If you look back in time at maybe times when you were less likely to get promoted, your income was lower, you had less job satisfaction, it might not, it's not definitely your spouse or your partner. It might be you too, right? So, like, the problem might lie with yourself. It just means that, in fact, it's more likely to lie with yourself. At the end of the day, we have more of an impact on those things than our spouse does. But the point of the study is that relationship, your primary relationship, the most important person in your life, that matters a lot. It does have an influence, and no matter what, you take two people who are both really good at their job and really highly satisfied with their job, and one of them has a spouse or a partner who is dependable and disciplined, and the other one doesn't. It's likely that makes a difference between the two. That could be a deciding factor between the two. So when you're kind of figuring out whether or not the person that you're with is this a potential long-term thing or not, these are the things to consider. And I know that there have been times in my career where I have felt more or less likely to want to take on a role with another organization or to move because I was worried about losing a relationship that I was in versus being one where I know my partner would come with me if I was going to get promoted. That makes a big difference. And I think you mentioned at the beginning it can be difficult to have these conversations. I think the reason why it can be difficult to have these conversations at the beginning is that for this to work, and let's just assume that you have two people who are both working. For this to work, both people have to prioritize what's best for the couple and the family versus themselves. But in any decision, it is likely the decision will end up benefiting one person more than the other. And if you don't have the history of lots of those decisions where both people can kind of look back on it and say, oh, this might have appeared like the decision was made because it benefited him or it benefited her. In actuality, I can look at it over the last few years and say, oh, we've made several of these decisions, and a lot of them have benefited me, not them. A lot of them have benefited them, not me. And you start to kind of have this kind of quiet assurance of like, oh, okay, it might seem like in the moment, in like you're looking at it on a microscope, this one decision did benefit one person over the other. But if both people are truly invested in the relationship as a whole, it will even out over time. There's no way it won't, because there's an inherent kind of, you kind of know what's best for the family. You know in the if you kind of take a moment to look at yourself in the mirror, whether something you want to do is just benefiting yourself or if it's benefiting the family or the couple or the long-term benefits of the relationship.
Yeah, no, and I think too it can be difficult when you have battling priorities. I think it's one of the things that outside of even just careers and maybe like who advances to what or what job is more important, and like people have those conversations, and you think about things like, well, what's the higher amount of income, and is that the more important job, or is this other, like there's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of depth in these conversations, but having a true understanding of priority, I think, is key, and that's the part of the discipline that I think is necessary in these relationships, is to say like, well, these are the priorities that we have as a couple, as a family, or as individuals. How do those priorities align? What's a priority more to you than me? Let's talk through that. Let's understand that. And it's not because you're having to make somebody change their priorities, but if you're choosing to be in any type of a relationship, that's kind of like step number one, is there's this compromise element that happens. It has to happen for two people versus just you. And like, I know people that are single and have been single for a really long time, and they will tell me it's because they're like, I don't want to give up my preferences and priorities. They're just
Yeah.
like, this is how I want to live my life. And until I find someone who aligns with that really clearly, I'm not going to step in that space, because it's probably because they've had, relationships where it wasn't the case, and it
Right.
was tough, and it was not healthy, and it was not good for them. But when you choose to be in a relationship, you're also choosing to say, we're going to adjust priorities so that we can prioritize the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
maybe over individual needs. And it doesn't mean that you give them all up. It just means that you've got to talk about them and talk through them, if you're going to make the best decisions possible. And when it comes to careers and promotions and income, like having that conversation to say, okay, well, this is the job that I'm in. What's the next job? Does the next
Right.
job require me to move? Does the next job have an impact on schedule, on time? Is the next job from an hourly job to a salary job? Like, what are the things? Does it require a lot of travel? Like having those conversations ahead of time and before opportunities pop up are extremely helpful in making sure that you're on the same page, and that when the opportunities happen, you're not having these conversations for the first time, because that's when you get a lot of emotion. That's when it becomes really difficult to think clearly and be able to articulate what your priorities are, why they matter, and the impact they'll have to both you, your relationship, your family, and kind of just your day-to-day living.
Right, because at that moment, if that's the first time you're having the conversation, it's no longer a hypothetical. It's an actual thing that has landed on your face, and now you have to deal with it. And if you don't have a very clear sense of what the values are, so because at the end of the day, this is no different than a leader, where it's easy to be a good leader when times are great. It's harder to be a good leader when times are tougher, and you have to make tough decisions. And this is the exact same thing. If you don't have a discussion about what your values are as individuals and as a couple, then it will be very difficult to take the decision that comes up and filter it through the lens of what those values are. And if you have those conversations in advance when they're just hypothetical, and you filter through potential scenarios through the lens of what you each stated your values are, and see what that looks like. Okay, we are saying that we both agree that what is valuable to us is time spent with each other. Okay, that's what we've said. Okay, all right, well, okay. So this job that was just offered to you or to me will increase your commute time or my commute time from 5 minutes each way every day to an hour and a half each way every day. Okay, so does that feel right, or does it not feel right? Well, if it feels right, well, then what that means is that what you stated is that your values are time together aren't necessarily the right value. Maybe you thought it was at the time, but what really the value is long-term career growth and progression in income. And then you can agree on that. And so there isn't a right or a wrong here. There's just how do you have the conversations and figure out what these shared values are, so that when the things come up, you can put them through that filter to make sure that they check out. And there's no way to do it without it actually happening. And sometimes that we can be very clear in our own minds, this is what's most important to me. And then something comes up that makes us go against that thing, and we have to say to ourselves for the first time, oh, I thought that was what was important to me. I guess in actuality, this is what's important to me. And as long as you have the self-awareness to kind of realize that in the moment, and then also talk about it with the spouse or the partner to say, you know what, I was wrong. I thought this is what was important to me, but the moment this thing came up and I put it through that filter that we discussed, it didn't check out. And I'm realizing that this is what's important. Let's talk about this again and figure it out, and figure out if this is the right thing to do, because we want to make sure that we're on the same page, and that the decisions are being made in spirit of what's best for us, not what's best for you or for me.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. In order to make sure that the person that you're with kind of fits the bill for what is supportive and dependable and disciplined, as the article that Daniel Pink is talking about states, it's important to have a discussion about what is important to you, and for them to bring to the table what is important to them, of course. and then to put those values through some hypotheticals that are actually likely to happen. Things like, what would happen if all of a sudden there is a child in this relationship that we weren't necessarily planning for right away? What would happen if one of us gets a job promotion that would move us out of the country or out of the state or out of the area? What would happen if one of us had to take care of aging parents at some point, and what does that mean for where we have to live or where we have to be? All of these things are likely to happen at some point in the future. And so talking about what you would do in a situation while it's still hypothetical is a way of kind of disarming it, because you can kind of at least talk about it objectively and without the kind of the emotional baggage that comes with having to make a decision in the moment when it's been foisted upon you. And if you talk about it in advance, then you have something to go off of. Like you know what feels right? Like if you say, if this were to happen, then this is what I think we should do. And then the person you're talking to can kind of say in the moment, that feels really right to me. Or, I don't know, that doesn't sit right with me. I think it should be this instead. Oh, that doesn't really sit right with me. This sits right. You talk it out, and you might come to an impasse. It might be that if a situation were to happen, that there is no agreement on what you want to do. And so what you would need to do is decide what's better: to take steps to make sure that thing doesn't happen, as much as you can, or to not be in this relationship, because knowing that if this kind of hypothetical becomes a reality, then it's going to be a major stressor or strain on the relationship or on the family if this were to happen. And that's why it's important to talk about these things in advance and to use them in hypotheticals, but to really have the conversation so that you can be aligned on what your values are.
Yeah, I think it's critical. There's something that I always recommend. It's called the Naval podcast, Naval. And he talks about the importance of having dialogue with like wealth, health, and kind of career, and kind of hobbies, hopes, and dreams, and things like that. But the importance of having that conversation with your partner, and I think the same exact thing I would say applies to career growth and potential and opportunity. Like having those open conversations and the uncomfortableness that will come with that, and the dialogue around priority, and what happens when the other person says, well, wait a minute, so are we saying then that your job is more important than mine? Or like being prepared to have that conversation and talk through it and understand it and figure it out. And again, like if you're approaching this as a couple or partnership, then you need to have these conversations, and it will feel a little bit awkward and weird, but you feel so much better and aligned afterward. And that's why I think it is critical to have the dialogue, align on values, align on some decisions, talk about the what ifs, keep them realistic. Don't go so far out and start adding, well, what if this and what if this and well, stick with just the first one.
Yeah.
And then what happens with that? And then if there's a second one, okay, but like keep it in context of a potential close opportunity or things that could happen, and then also realize with each other that things can change, and
Right.
you can make a different decision later on based upon new information. So like you're also not stuck to the plan if you're trying to define a plan over a longer period of time, but keeping the things in front of you, staying aligned on values, clarifying your priorities, and then making sure that you're talking through the next potential thing that could happen. I think those three things will be really helpful in setting you up for success into the future.
Right. And you also have to realize too that the likelihood of two people being together for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and neither of them change is also kind of unrealistic, right? So the idea of, it's not that the relationships that last are the ones where neither person changes. That's boring. The relationships that last are the ones where both people change and both people are still okay with those changes, because there is growth and there is change that occurs within individuals all the time. If you are a growth oriented person, then you will change and your values will change over time. My values, the single biggest thing that changed my values was having kids. Like that was it. And I think for a lot of people that is the case. It's really hard to know what your values will be before you have kids, and they will change. And there are other things that will happen in your life that will cause you to have to change your values. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing because it means you have the ability to take in new information and make changes, as opposed to kind of holding steadfast on something because at some point you decided this was the right thing when you were 22 and now it's all of a sudden like I have to stay with this thing. No, like it's important to be able to change and to have a person with you that wants that change and that growth because of what it means for the ability for the family or the partnership or the spousal relationship to grow together. Those are the most successful ones. So plan on changing, plan on your values changing, plan on the values of your spouse or partner changing, and knowing that these conversations will have to happen again and again over time. And that's a good thing. That doesn't mean that they're flip-flopping or wishy-washy. It means that there's growth and you have to grow together or you'll end up growing apart.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.